I have been with the movie star Hudson Wu for 5 years, and we have a daughter together, but I've always been his hidden lover, someone he can't acknowledge in public. In the middle of the night, our child fell ill, and we took our daughter to the hospital. Suddenly, we ran into the paparazzi. He quickly left me and our child behind, running away at full speed. I was left struggling to take care of my daughter, who was burning up with a fever. The next day, Hudson told the media, "There's no secret marriage, no girlfriend, and certainly no child." Looking at his confident face, I suddenly felt exhausted. I packed up our things and left the villa with my daughter. My daughter asked, "Mommy, aren't we going to tell Uncle Wu?" My eyes turned red. My daughter is already 4 years old, yet she still can't call Hudson dad. She doesn't even know that Hudson is her father. No, I wiped away my tears. Uncle Wu is just an uncle. He's very busy, so we shouldn't bother him. Chapter 1. I drove to the kindergarten for a parent-child activity. The teacher glanced behind me and asked, "Sarah's father isn't here again?" I awkwardly replied, "He's very busy." The teacher said, "This is Children's Day, and it only comes once a year." I apologized. "I'm sorry. Sarah's father is abroad and couldn't make it back." The teacher left. During the activity, all the other children had both their mom and dad with them. Only Sarah had just me by her side. I tried my best to cheer her up, but Sarah didn't seem very interested. After the activity, we went home, and she looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, is Daddy still in Africa?" I said, "Yes, Daddy is in Africa filming elephants." Sarah asked hopefully, "When will he come back?" I was silent for a moment before softly saying, "In a little while." Earlier, Sarah asked me who her father was and where he was. I casually made up a story, saying he was a photographer who traveled the world filming animals. Sarah believed me, and she would sit in front of the TV every day watching wildlife documentaries, asking, "Mommy, did Daddy film this?" I lied to her. "Yes, Daddy is amazing, isn't he?" Sarah cheered. "Daddy is so awesome." At 1 in the morning, I heard a noise in the house. Half asleep, I opened my eyes. A warm kiss gently touched my forehead. "You're awake. Go back to sleep." The man's voice was deep and magnetic. The soft light of the night lamp illuminated his chiseled face. I looked up and met a pair of smiling dark eyes. After kissing me, Hudson leaned over to check on Sarah and kissed her on the cheek. I couldn't help but ask, "Didn't you say you'd come back early today?" Hudson stood up and took off his coat, saying as he did so, "I ran into someone I've been wanting to meet at the dinner party, so it took a bit longer." He casually tossed his coat onto the carpet and unbuttoned his shirt, revealing his sexy Adam's apple. "Who?" He smiled as he pulled me into his arms. "Don't worry. It was a man, the head of the Chow group." I said, "Oh." I wasn't surprised. A woman couldn't easily tempt him, but his career could. On such an important occasion as Children's Day, he wouldn't delay seeing his daughter for a woman. If he delayed, it was most likely because it was related to his career. This kind of situation happened so often that I had grown used to it. Chapter 2. That day, Hudson stayed until 4 in the morning before hurriedly leaving again. My daughter held the watch he left behind and asked, "Mommy, did Uncle Wu come last night?" I nodded. "Yes. He came specifically to celebrate Children's Day with you, but you were asleep, so he didn't want to disturb you." She pouted. "Next time, wake me up." "I won't sleep. Daddy doesn't come home, and Uncle Wu works so hard to spend time with me. I want to play with Uncle Wu." I forced a smile and said, "Okay," but I couldn't tell her that Uncle Wu is actually her real daddy. I used washing up as an excuse to hide my troubled expression. If I told others that the famous movie star, amidst his busy schedule, came home at 1 in the morning to see his girlfriend's child and then rushed back to work at 4, everyone would praise him as a good man. Many times, I comforted myself like this: "He's already done enough. Don't ask for too much." But the feelings of disappointment, emptiness, and bitterness grew day by day. After making sure Sarah had breakfast and sending her to kindergarten, I drove to the nearby photo studio where I work. Numbly, I took ID photos for people with my camera, Repetition, repetition, repetition. They complimented my photography, and I smiled faintly, exhausted. As I sat down at my desk to rest, my gaze unintentionally passed over a National Geographic magazine on the table, and somewhere deep inside me, I suddenly felt a slight pang of pain. Chapter 3. I met Hudson 7 years ago. Back then, I was still a young, vibrant, and carefree college student. I loved outdoor activities and photography. Full of energy and athleticism, my dream was to become a photographer after graduation, to travel the world with my gear, capturing images of animals. I never thought I would one day become a fan. No, not a fan. It was love at first sight. At that time, Hudson was still a newcomer who had just started his career. He had only recently gained some recognition in the entertainment industry after playing a supporting role in a popular historical drama. He came to our university for a promotional event. A friend dragged me along to watch and take photos. Hudson stood on stage, shining so brightly that it was impossible to look away. The host randomly invited an audience member to come up and interact. As if it was fate, when I moved closer to the stage with my camera, she chose me. Hello, student. On stage, Hudson, wearing a V-neck white shirt, smiled and reached out his hand. His dark eyes were curved in a friendly manner, as approachable as the popular boy next door. My heart suddenly tightened, and, unusually for my typically outgoing self, I became so nervous that my hands and feet began to sweat. I quickly put away my camera and, stammering, reached out. Hello. The moment our hands touched, it felt like an electric current surged through me. In that instant, I could almost hear the sound of a seed falling into the soil. As for what kind of flower it was, at that time, I didn't know the shape of the flower or its name. Chapter 4. After the promotional event, I couldn't wait to dig up all of Hudson's past works. I discovered that his singing and acting skills were far superior to those of many popular young actors and actresses. How could someone like him remain unknown? I felt it was unfair. So, I edited clips of his performances and created a social media account for him, where I wrote extensive analyses. His small group of fans gathered on my social media platform, attracted by my content. I uploaded the photos I had taken, and they were praised by everyone. Someone suggested, "Sweetie, your photos are amazing. You should become Hudson's fan site manager. We'll support you." Caught up in the moment, I impulsively said, "Sure." And just like that, I inexplicably became Hudson's fan site manager, chasing after him with my camera, from fan site manager to a prominent fan, and eventually becoming the head of his fan base. Everything happened naturally. Looking back now, I still find it hard to understand how this all came to be. Before I met Hudson, I had never been a fan of anyone, nor was I involved in fan circles. In just a few short months, I somehow became the head of his fan base. 7 months later, Hudson's career, which had just started to show promise, suffered a devastating blow. Entangled in negative news, he was blacklisted for a year and a half. Fans gradually left him. Even those who stayed were secretly moving on to other idols. Only I remained steadfast. Originally, it was the manager who communicated with the fanbase leaders, but during that time, the manager paid less attention to Hudson and handed over my contact to Hudson, so he could interact with me directly. During that difficult year and a half, we often chatted, encouraged each other, and gradually went from strangers to friends. I continued to update the fan site diligently, to gather material. We met privately. By this time, Hudson had already let go of his idol image and didn't mind interacting with fans privately. I didn't have much money. All I could offer was my skills. I personally did his makeup, took photos, edited videos, and even started helping him with business deals. Although it wasn't much, it was better than nothing. Hudson deeply appreciated my efforts. He said, "Nicole, you're my pillar of strength. Without you, I don't know how I would have gotten through this." When I was exhausted, a single word of praise from him would energize me as if I had been injected with adrenaline. If a war had broken out, I probably would have grabbed an AK-47 without hesitation and cleared the way for him. At that time, I thought of myself as Hudson's guardian angel, destined to save him. He seemed so weak and helpless. If I abandoned him, he would truly have nothing left. A year and a half later, the popular actress who had accused Hudson of insulting her was exposed with a lot of scandals, including the fact that she had insulted Hudson first. And he only responded in anger. From that moment on, Hudson was vindicated, and fans and onlookers flocked to his social media to apologize. The company lifted Hudson's ban and gave him resources. He seized the opportunity to switch to film and soared to success, unstoppable in his rise. After attending an award ceremony, he came home and handed me the trophy, saying, "Nicole, this is our shared glory." We held the trophy together and embraced tightly. Chapter 5. During that year and a half, Hudson never gave up on his career. He actively sought out business opportunities, visiting influential figures, and even after being rejected countless times, he never lost heart. He only cried in front of me, but the next day, he would continue his visits. Whenever he had time, he would ask me to rehearse with him. I helped him practice his lines while he acted out the scenes, asking for my feedback. From start to finish, he never compromised his principles, never crossed any lines, and never abandoned his dreams. My feelings for Hudson began with his looks, deepened with his talent, and solidified with his character. In those difficult years, his indomitable spirit, his resilience in getting up after each fall, made me admire him more and more. And eventually, I fell in love with him. We were kindred spirits, sharing outdoor activities, deep conversations, and life's ups and downs together. We fought together, grieved together, and laughed together. Our mutual admiration naturally evolved into love. It was then that I finally understood the seed that was planted the day I met Hudson was the seed of love. Now that flower had blossomed, radiant and fragrant. Perhaps it was too dazzling, as the flower seemed to be shrouded in a light, its shape not quite clear. As Hudson's career revived, it brought new challenges to our relationship. If he had remained obscure, there would have been nothing wrong with us being together openly. But he had made a comeback, and his career was soaring. I never expected him to win his first Best Actor award so quickly. With greater investments and a broader network flooding in, he had the potential to go even further and climb even higher. At that moment, I, his girlfriend from outside the industry with no background, no longer seemed appropriate. I suggested we break up, but Hudson refused. That period was painful for both of us. Neither of us wanted to let go of this relationship, but the realities of our situation made it difficult for us to stay together. The halo of love faded, revealing the flower's true form. It was a camellia, pure, beautiful, and fragrant, but with a faint bitterness. Chapter 6. After a period of turmoil, just as we were about to break up, I found out I was pregnant. "Please keep this child." Hudson knelt before me, pleading, "Nicole, I beg you." He then pulled out a beautiful diamond ring and proposed to me. "Marry me." He said that although he couldn't give me a legal marriage at the moment, he swore that I would be the only woman in his life. He spoke with such sincerity and devotion that it was impossible not to be moved. At this time, he had just transitioned from being an idol to a serious actor, and his position was still unstable. Having a child, let alone even admitting to having a girlfriend, could have a devastating impact on his career. Yet he knelt and begged me to keep the baby. I believed he must love me deeply, and I loved him too, so I eventually agreed. "This is wonderful, Nicole. We're going to have a baby." He picked me up and spun me around. He laughed. I laughed too. Our happiness was so pure. Just the fact that we were going to have a baby made us laugh like fools. Back then, I naively thought, let's just wait for a while. Once his career stabilizes, I'll be able to step into the light. But since we couldn't make our relationship public, I had to become pregnant out of wedlock. During that critical time in his career, he asked me to keep it a secret from even my parents. When my parents found out I was pregnant without being married and was determined to keep the baby, they were furious and threatened to cut ties with me. What followed was a series of arguments, tears, and intense struggles. In the end, I remained firm in my decision to have the baby and moved into Hudson's villa, becoming his hidden lover. Hudson was very busy. His career grew bigger and bigger, with more awards and honors, and he became a household name. I was proud of him, but it was also painful. For his career, I broke off ties with my parents. For his career, on the day I gave birth, he rushed back but had to leave that night. I had to pretend to be fine and told him to go, that I was okay. For his career, I fabricated a story about a father who went to Africa, not daring to tell our daughter that Uncle Wu was actually her father. For his career, I gave up my own dreams, silently raising our child and being his lover. He always said, "Nicole, just wait a little longer. Soon, we'll be able to get married officially, and I'll introduce you to the whole nation." So I waited, and waited, 1 year, and then another. The child was born, the child grew up, the child started kindergarten. I was tired. Chapter 7. For our child's 4th birthday, Hudson rushed home at 8 p.m., and we had a small birthday party, a rare moment where the whole family was together. Sarah rarely saw Uncle Wu, so she refused to sleep, staying up until midnight before finally drifting off. At 1 in the morning, Sarah developed a fever. No matter what we did, it wouldn't go down. We drove to the hospital. It was an emergency, but Hudson first took the time to put on a hat and mask, disguising himself before heading to the underground parking lot. Outside, a heavy downpour blurred the city's neon lights. Rainwater pooled on the streets, reflecting the faint outlines of the city. Cars sped by, shattering the reflections into scattered lights. I kept trying to soothe our child, anxious and uneasy. We arrived at the hospital entrance. We got out and rushed to the emergency room with our daughter. Click! Amidst the sound of the pouring rain, the distinct noise of a camera shutter echoed. It was a sound I had heard countless times before. Familiar. So familiar that even with the thunder and lightning, I could hear it. Hudson was just as familiar with it. So familiar that he didn't even look back. Instead, he quickly handed our child to me. I dropped the umbrella, fumbling to catch her. He rushed back to the car and sped away. Sarah cried loudly. I stood in the pouring rain, holding our child. The black umbrella rolled beside me. The lightning cut through the dark sky, and the heavy rain obscured everything. Warm tears mixed with the rain, distorting the scene before my eyes. I watched as he grew more distant in the blur. That night was like countless others when I took our child to the hospital alone, communicating with the doctor, comforting the child, getting medicine, administering injections. Nothing was different. The only difference was that I sat in a corner, soaked through, feeling a pain in my heart that made it hard to breathe. My phone kept ringing. I glanced at the caller ID but didn't want to answer. At dawn, the rain cleared, and the sky turned a bright, clear blue. I gazed out the window and murmured softly, "The sky in Africa must be just as blue." When Sarah woke up, I wearily took her home in a taxi. My phone lay in my bag, showing 20 missed calls, all from Hudson. The last one was a message from him on WeChat. "Nicole, how's Sarah? Has the fever gone down? What caused it?" He was constantly worried about Sarah's condition, his words revealing his anxiety, but he still hadn't come to the hospital, not even for a moment. Finally, he said, "I have to go to the set now." I held my phone for a long time, then replied, "Sarah is fine." Hudson is a very dedicated actor. In the dead of winter, if the director asked him to jump into a lake, he would do so without hesitation. He was always punctual, sometimes even arriving early, never keeping others waiting. If a scene didn't turn out well, he would insist on reshooting, even if it meant doing it over a dozen times. But he was too ambitious, too devoted to his work, always prioritizing his career, while our child and I were pushed further and further down the list. Broken promises, countless moments of patience. I was truly exhausted. I couldn't help but message him. "Hudson, I'm thinking of applying to join the National Geographic team for a photography assignment. Maybe capturing animals or local customs. You should take care of the child for a while." That afternoon, I received a message from Hudson. "Still thinking of going to Africa to photograph animals? That place is dangerous and tough. Why would you want to go? Are you still upset about last night? I can take some time off soon and come back to spend time with you both. By the way, Try not to go out these days. Layla will have someone watching over you. I smiled bitterly as I read his message. Whenever I mentioned going to Africa to photograph animals, Hudson was always against it. But for me, it wasn't about Africa. It was about fulfilling my dreams. The location didn't matter. It could be Africa, Europe, the Americas, or even a small village in our own country. He could pursue his dreams, but he expected me to give up mine, to stay home and raise the child, waiting for someone who never came home. Ding! The sound of a news notification interrupted my thoughts. I opened it. Hudson suspected of secret marriage was trending on the hot search list. Chapter 8. The news about Hudson's secret marriage caused quite a stir. A paparazzi blogger with a large following exposed some information, confidently claiming that Hudson was secretly married. The article analyzed various clues, suggesting that Hudson had a hidden lover and even a child. One of the pictures included was a blurry shot from the night before, during the rainstorm, showing Hudson holding Sarah as he got out of the car, with me following under an umbrella. The photo only showed two blurred figures, revealing nothing definitive. Hudson's reaction was appropriate. He didn't turn back. Instead, he immediately handed the child to me and quickly ducked into the car, avoiding getting his face caught on camera. Commenters mocked the situation, saying it was likely just a woman taking her child to the hospital late at night, and perhaps a rideshare driver was helping hold the child. They dismissed the claim that this was evidence of Hudson's secret marriage, calling it a ridiculous stretch. The public didn't believe the rumors, and I breathed a sigh of relief for Hudson. But after that relief, I felt a deep sadness. This situation had played out many times before. He missed appointments, broke promises, didn't come home, left me and our child behind, all with valid reasons. I couldn't even blame him. To blame him would be to seem unreasonable, to make demands that were too much. But I felt so hurt. The pain only grew stronger. I anxiously followed the news. The blogger then released more information, including 2 photos of Hudson and me from a trip abroad, showing our backs. In an attempt to confirm the rumor, one of the photos clearly showed Hudson's back, and the clothes he was wearing were identified as ones he had worn in a specific place, used to verify that the person in the photo was indeed him. The situation escalated further. That evening, Hudson responded on a show, saying, "There is no secret marriage, no wife, and certainly no child. Thank you." He smiled calmly, seemingly unbothered, as if none of it was true. I stared at his face without blinking, trying to catch any hint of something. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. After the stabbing pain in my heart subsided, a strange calmness washed over me. The next day, Layla, the woman Hudson mentioned, came to the house, insisting on placing 2 bodyguards and ordering me to stay in the villa 24/7. I refused her arrangement. She was furious. "Do you realize how much trouble you could cause Hudson by not cooperating?" I said. "I just want to live a normal life." She stared at me for a moment before sneering. "Don't think I don't know your type. You'd love to get caught by the paparazzi, hoping to go from the shadows into the light. Well, let me tell you, stop dreaming and behave." "Mommy." Sarah clung to my leg, frightened. Layla rubbed her temples. "For heaven's sake, Hudson, fooling around with women is one thing, but getting a child involved, you sure know how to make things difficult for me." I suppressed my anger and gently sent Sarah to her room to play. Once Sarah was gone, I turned to Layla with a cold expression and asked, "Even if the truth about me and the child were exposed, would it really have such a big impact on him?" "Of course," Layla snapped. "He signed a contract that requires him to remain single. You two cannot be exposed." I said. "He is single." Layla paused, confused. I spoke calmly. "He never married me. He's been single all along and hasn't violated his contract. He's always been careful, not allowing me to call him my husband, nor letting Sarah call him daddy. Sarah doesn't even know he's her father." Layla was silent for a moment before she smiled. "Good. That's how it should be." "Yes, that's how it should be." I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. I said, "I'm resigning." That afternoon, I went to the photo studio to quit my job. The manager tried hard to convince me to stay, but I was firm in my decision to leave. Layla was pleased with my compliance and told me to stay quiet and not cause any trouble for Hudson. I said, okay. Then, I went to the kindergarten to withdraw Sarah. The teacher seemed disappointed. Why? Sarah was adjusting so well. I said, Sarah's father has relocated to another city, so we need to move. Oh, I see. The teacher wished us well, glad that we would finally be reunited as a family. I thanked her. Layla was even more satisfied knowing that Sarah would no longer be attending kindergarten. A few days later, Sarah was completely recovered. I packed our things and took off the ring on my finger, placing it on the nightstand. I looked around at the house where we had lived for several years. Hudson had never been stingy with material things. Everything here was exquisite and luxurious. But this home didn't belong to me. Sarah asked, Mommy, aren't we going to tell Uncle Wu? I stroked her head and said, Uncle Wu is very busy. We shouldn't bother him. Sarah hesitated. But I'll miss Uncle Wu. I said, Uncle Wu is just an uncle, and we've been staying at his house for a long time. It's time to move out. Sarah nodded. Yes, we shouldn't trouble others for too long. I smiled faintly and took her small hand. Let's go, Sarah. Sarah said, okay. Chapter 9. Leaving with Sarah went smoothly. Layla had gone to handle other matters and wasn't at the villa. Before I left, I glanced at the meticulously maintained garden, where a few camellias were in bloom. It said that camellias bloom longer than most flowers, lasting up to 7 months. My feelings for Hudson had also lasted 7 years. Flowers bloom in their time. No matter how brilliantly they bloom, there's always a day when they wither. I used to think that overcoming all obstacles to be with the one you love was a happy thing, but that happiness slowly faded away in the endless waiting and countless lonely days. On the way, I tried calling home again. The number you have dialed is not reachable. Still no contact. After falling out with my family, I often tried to call, but my number had been blocked. I even went back home, but each time I was turned away at the door. First, I took Sarah to the hotel we had booked and took her to the amusement park she had been longing to visit. I thought they would quickly realize that Sarah and I were gone, but 2 days passed, and Hudson still hadn't contacted me. I didn't know if he hadn't noticed or if he simply didn't care. Mommy, stop playing with your phone, Sarah said unhappily as we ate pizza. I paused for a moment, then put down my phone and said, okay, it's strange, I'm the one who wanted to leave. Yet here I am waiting for a call. I had hoped we could talk things through over the phone, so I could explain my decision to break up with him. I had thought of so much, prepared a long speech, but I hadn't considered that he might not reach out at all. It made me feel like a fool, like a clown. In truth, I've probably always been a clown, haven't I? When I think about it, what is there to say? Nothing worth saying. I would only be accusing him of things he shouldn't have done. I could already predict his defenses, that he had no choice, that he had valid reasons, and then we would fall into the same argument, repeating the same cycle over and over again. I knew the process so well that I could recite it backward, and in the end, I would gain nothing from it. So really, there's no point in talking. My joys and sorrows mean nothing to his career. Repeating meaningless things in his ear won't make him change his mind, it'll just make him find me inexplicable. Why bother? I smiled, finally at peace, and deleted all of Hudson's contact information. I also blocked everyone connected to him. Leaving the entertainment industry isn't hard. Saying it's hard would be a lie. In this era where everyone is vying for attention, unless you intentionally market yourself, who would care whether someone leaves or joins the industry, or what they're doing? As an ordinary person, no one pays attention to me. As long as Hudson doesn't mention us, even if Sarah and I were to run naked down the street, at most, people would laugh, but it wouldn't cause a stir. Sarah and I need to live a normal life, and Hudson needs to focus on his work. Separating and not seeing each other is the best solution. We both knew this from the start, but because of so-called love, we forced ourselves to stay together, causing unnecessary trouble and exhausting everyone in the end. But now, it's finally over. We're both free. I took Sarah back to my hometown, only to be met with a locked door once again. My father is a strong-willed man. When he says something, He means it. He built himself up from nothing and is known locally for his integrity. When he said he didn't recognize me as his daughter, he truly meant it. To him, reputation is everything. To him, I'm a stain on his reputation, something that could disrupt his image and career. So when he said he wouldn't have me in his life, he meant it. Men's ambition for their careers is probably all the same. Anything that stands in the way of their career can be discarded. Even family. My father is like that. And so is Hudson. Of course, I wronged my family first, so I could humble myself and beg repeatedly. But I never wronged Hudson, so I could walk away from him without hesitation. Dad, Mom, brother, Sarah and I have come to see you. I called out loudly outside the villa. The courtyard was silent, with no one responding. I placed the gifts at the front door and left with Sarah. Sarah seemed uneasy. Grandpa and Grandma don't like me? I patted her head and said, they will, because Sarah is wonderful. Sarah is my precious daughter. I bring her back every year, and every time we are met with a closed door. I've made mistakes, so being ignored is deserved. But Sarah has done nothing wrong. She shouldn't have to go through this. From now on, I won't bring her back here again. On the way, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, I heard a familiar voice. Nicole, where did you take Sarah? Layla said you've been gone for 2 days. Back to my hometown. I said shortly. A few days ago. I had a lot to say, waiting for him to call so I could say it all. But now, I didn't want to say anything. It was like how, over the years, we went from talking about everything, laughing and crying together, to calmly saying I'm back, exchanging a few words about work, then a few more about the child, and finally falling into silence. An invisible wall stood between us. Some say that when the gap between a couple becomes too large, they inevitably drift apart. I didn't believe that before. Now, I do. He stepped into a dazzling world, while I stayed behind, and as communication dwindled and mutual understanding faded, we were left with nothing to say. This must be what they mean by having no common ground. It's good to get out for a while, he said after a brief pause, then cautiously asked, when are you coming back? I'm not, I replied. Not coming back? Right. I turned to look out the car window at the evening sky, where sharp buildings split the setting sun in two. The scene was breathtaking. See, there's nothing that can't be divided. Even division can be beautiful. Hudson, we're breaking up. Don't come to see us again. Focus on your career, I said, leaning back in the car seat. Only come to see Sarah when you're ready to let her call you Dad. Actually, I hope you never do, so she doesn't have to be confused. With that, I hung up and blocked his number once more. Chapter 10. The next day, I took Sarah to S-City. Earlier, I had applied for a job at a magazine that specializes in photographing models. I used the photos I had taken of Hudson as part of my application. It's kind of funny, really, because besides photographing him, the only other photos I had taken were ID photos at the photo studio. The only portfolio I could present was the photos of Hudson. The magazine accepted me, and just like that, I started working as a photographer for the magazine. A real photographer with the opportunity to create, not just someone who presses a shutter button to take ID photos every day. I rented an apartment, found a kindergarten, and enrolled Sarah. Sarah, being the understanding child she is, said, Mommy, don't worry about work. I'll be good. My eyes welled up as I gently hugged her. Remember, besides Mommy, you mustn't go with anyone else. Sarah asked, what about Uncle Wu? I replied, not even him. The rumors about Hudson's secret marriage eventually died down. Hudson had been extremely cautious, and the paparazzi couldn't find any solid evidence. A few blurry photos of someone's back weren't enough to prove anything. I deleted many apps and turned off notifications. News from the entertainment industry no longer concerned me. Life suddenly became peaceful. Without Hudson, I no longer had to worry about being caught by the paparazzi. No longer had to wait anxiously for him to come home. No longer had to feel trapped in a photo studio. It felt good. I didn't go to Africa to photograph animals. Working while raising a child wasn't exactly convenient, but I was happy to be with her. At first, as a photographer, I had no success, and the pay was low. It's a highly competitive industry, largely dependent on connections. If you have connections, you get more commercial work and live comfortably. If not, you rely on what the magazine assigns, and the pay is minimal. Luckily, I had a knack for photography, particularly when it came to capturing people. Gradually, I gained repeat clients and started getting private commissions. I also did some freelance work online. The price per job quickly rose from $200 to $800. It wasn't as much as what a famous photographer might make, but it was enough to live on and buy Sarah pretty little dresses. Gradually, some lesser-known celebrities from the entertainment industry began to approach me for photo shoots. They couldn't afford well-known photographers, so they came to try me out. I treated each one the same, putting in my best effort. Without them having to say anything, I would find their best angles and capture their best moments, with the mindset that I was going to help make them famous. If the shots weren't good enough, I would make them redo it until we got it right, exhausting them in the process. But they enjoyed this struggle, especially when they saw the final photos. Their eyes would light up with excitement. That gave me a great sense of accomplishment. Every day, I made sure to leave work on time to pick up Sarah. While work is important, so is family. I didn't want Sarah to experience the long waits that I had endured. Being late can have a broken window effect. If you're late picking up your child once, it's likely to happen again, and then again. Eventually, it could become a habit, and later, you might stop picking them up altogether, relying on someone else, or maybe you wouldn't come home at all, leaving a nanny to care for Sarah. Just like Hudson. First, he was always on time. Then, he wasn't. Then, he broke promises. And eventually, he broke them over and over without feeling any guilt. He always had reasons. I could have told Sarah that I had to work and might be late, but I didn't want to do that. If I said I had to be late because of work, understanding as she is, Sarah would surely say, "It's okay, Mommy," but I knew it would hurt her inside. Life went on peacefully and fulfillingly. Not long after, a series of photos I took went viral online. The subject of the photos was a young celebrity who became an overnight sensation with those school uniform pictures, earning the title of National School Heartthrob. Chapter 11. Nicole, you're amazing. I want to treat you to dinner. Jack, the young celebrity, called me excitedly. I couldn't refuse, so I accepted. Jack is cute and handsome, with two little tiger teeth that show when he smiles. Judging by his face, you might think he's just a charming young guy, but in reality, he has a strong, muscular build with an impressive set of 8-pack abs, a striking contrast. When I first saw him, I immediately thought of doing a photo shoot that would highlight this contradiction, capturing his contrasting features. Sure enough, after we released the photos and did some marketing, they went viral. At dinner, he kept praising me. I had a little to drink, so I started talking more. "You don't need to thank me. I was paid to bring out your unique traits in the photos. And for a photo shoot to be successful, you need marketing, luck, and the right timing and circumstances." Jack poured me another drink. "Nicole, other photographers have tried to capture what you did, but they all failed. Only your photos had the impact to make the marketing successful. Nicole, you're incredibly talented." It was the first time a client had praised me so sincerely, and it made me genuinely happy. I smiled and raised my glass. "To your bright future." He raised his glass too. "And to your dreams coming true." I paused, a bit surprised by his words. Dreams coming true? I found myself liking this 21-year-old a little more. After that, Jack introduced me to several more commercial gigs, all involving his friends. Most of them were trainees, minor celebrities, or small-time influencers. Their photos didn't become as famous as Jack's, but given the quality of the photos I took for the price I charged, they were very satisfied. Over time, my relationship with Jack grew closer. He reminded me a lot of Hudson. Both had struggled in obscurity for a long time, and once they caught a break, they climbed the ladder relentlessly, seizing every opportunity. Now, Jack had secured a secondary male lead role in a high-profile drama. He said I was his lucky charm and invited me again. "Nicole, would you be my personal photographer?" I smiled lightly. Sure, as long as you pay me well. I was past the age of impulsiveness. After spending all my passion on Hudson, I had learned to stay calm. No matter how eager or enthusiastic someone else might be, Jack's success made my name known in the industry. And soon, offers started pouring in. One offer stood out. They were willing to pay 100,000 yuan for me to photograph a celebrity. 100,000 yuan was tempting. I said, please understand, I have a child, so I can only shoot in this city, and I need to finish by 4 p.m. They replied, no problem. So, I went to the specified location. As I walked in, I saw a familiar tall figure standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette illuminated by the sunlight. Glowing. Hudson. I immediately turned to leave. Nicole. Hudson rushed over and grabbed my arm. Let go. The room was empty except for the two of us. Hudson held me tightly. I took a deep breath and stopped struggling. Hudson, let go. I won't. Nicole, you're so heartless, making me search for you for so long. He accused me. I turned my head to see the expression of relief on his face, and my feelings became complicated. Hudson, we've already broken up. I never agreed. We should have broken up a long time ago. Don't say things like that. Hudson held on tight. I let him embrace me, but as I reflected on it, I realized I couldn't recapture the feeling I used to have when we hugged. Camellias bloom, but they must eventually wither. The love had faded. The emotions had dissipated. Those once heartwarming, joyous embraces could no longer stir any passion within me. Hudson whispered words of love in my ear, asking me to come back. I listened to his rambling without saying a word. He held me so tightly that it started to hurt. After a while, I asked, so, can you let Sarah openly call you Dad? He suddenly fell silent. I continued, can we openly get married? He was quiet for a long time before he finally said, Nicole, just give me a little more time. I pushed his hand away. This time, my strength wasn't as strong as before, and I easily broke free. See, no matter how much he loves me, when it comes to his career, he can let go. Why do you think I should give you more time? I asked him, what made you think that I would always wait for you, that I would always long to marry you? Is it because you're successful, a movie star, earning more and more famous, while I'm just an ordinary person? So, I'm supposed to wait silently in the background, to be at your beck and call? Do you think because you're better than me, I should sacrifice everything, supporting you like a servant supports a king? Hudson remained silent. Or do you think because you're a movie star, bringing me here without my consent, holding me and kissing me, doesn't count as sexual harassment, that the law would find you innocent? Hudson's eyes widened, as if he couldn't believe how harsh I was being. Nicole, you know that's not what I meant. We've broken up. Hudson, I said. Hudson grew angry. But I'm Sarah's father. Is it a crime for me to see my own wife and child? My eyes stung with unshed tears. Hudson, we were never married. I gave birth to Sarah by myself at the hospital. She has my last name, Lee. My name is Nicole Lee, and her name is Sarah Lee, not Wu. You were the one who didn't want her to call you Dad, who didn't let her have your last name. You insisted she call you Uncle to keep her from slipping up. Now you want to say she's your child. Are you willing to publicly acknowledge her? Hudson's lips moved, but he had nothing to say. I stared at him and continued, I don't need you to marry me, and I don't need you to make our relationship public. I don't care anymore. All I ask is that you publicly acknowledge Sarah as your daughter. If you can do that, I'll allow you to see her as her father. Can you do that? Silence. The sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting half the room in light and the other half in shadow. Hudson stood at the boundary between light and dark, his face obscured. He didn't answer, but his silence was an answer in itself. I wiped away my tears and walked out of the room. Chapter 12. On Wednesday, after picking up Sarah and heading home, a familiar figure blocked my way at the entrance of our apartment building. It was Layla. She looked displeased. Hudson wants to see you. The way she looked at me was as if I were something she couldn't get rid of. Like a piece of dog poop. I said, I won't see him. Layla was furious. What are you trying to pull? I told you to stay quiet and low profile, and yet you ran off to S-City to become a photographer, and you've even made a name for yourself. Are you trying to ruin Hudson? I paused for a moment, then turned and walked forward without looking back. Hey, did you hear me? She caught up to me and grabbed my arm. Sarah screamed in fear. Mommy! I forcefully pushed Layla away, seeing the disbelief in her eyes. I said, don't bother me and my child again. If you show up one more time, I'll go out onto the street and publicly announce my relationship with Hudson. Layla hesitated for a moment, then said, you wouldn't do that. You had a child with him and waited for years just to be with him openly. You wouldn't destroy him. I said, I would have before, but not now. Layla frowned. Fine. You've won. This tactic of playing hard to get has driven Hudson crazy. He's turned down many offers over the past 2 months, searching for you everywhere. At this point, you've achieved your goal. So stop being stubborn. I took out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was answered immediately. Nicole? Tell your people to stop bothering me and Sarah. I said calmly. Hudson, I'm not your accessory, and I'm not playing some hard-to-get game. I'm also not going to stay in the villa 24/7 like a prisoner. We've broken up. If you're so afraid that Sarah and I will damage your career, you can simply never see us again as long as we don't meet. Even if I go out and tell everyone that Sarah is your daughter, without proof, no one would believe it. I glanced at the puzzled Layla and continued, or perhaps, you could hire a hitman, stage an accident, and make Sarah and me disappear from this world. Then you could rest easy. You know I'd never do that. Why say it just to hurt me? Did Layla come to see you? Hudson asked. I didn't want to hear any more of his nonsense, so I hung up the phone and calmly told Layla, I've already talked things over with Hudson. We've broken up. This isn't about throwing a tantrum. If you bother me again, I'll call the police. Layla was in disbelief. How could you? How could you give up on a man as amazing as Hudson? Even I. She abruptly fell silent. I suddenly realized that Layla had feelings for Hudson, which explained her hostility toward me. You like him? Then go after him. I don't care. I took Sarah's hand and walked into the apartment building. Layla didn't follow. Mommy, Sarah tugged at my hand, worried. That woman came back again. What's her relationship with Uncle Wu? Are we causing trouble for him? My heart ached as I knelt down to hug her. No, we've left. We won't bother Uncle Wu anymore. That night, after Sarah fell asleep, I sat by the window, looking at the neon lights outside. After thinking for a long time, I decided not to move. Why should I hide and run away because of people who don't matter? What crime have I committed that I need to live in fear? I walked over to Sarah's bed and looked at her sleeping face, a small smile spreading across my lips. I've lost Hudson, and I've lost my family, but I won't be defeated, because I already have the most precious person in the world, my dear daughter. For her, I must be strong and keep moving forward. Chapter 13. I threw myself into work with a fervor. I started saving money to buy a house. I wanted to settle down in S-City. It's a city full of opportunities. Owning my own house, even if it's small, would bring me joy. I wouldn't have to live in a beautiful big house while feeling empty inside. There wouldn't be people like Layla treating me like a canary that depends solely on men, looking down on me with extreme disdain. Nor would there be bodyguards who, while outwardly respectful, secretly held me in contempt. Some might think that as long as you have enough money, you can overlook such things. But I can't. I value my dignity and my dreams more than material wealth. Besides, I've never lacked material things. Living a luxurious life might be difficult, but supporting myself and my child has never been a problem. Pursuing a dream at nearly 30 might seem a bit late. So, I'll make the most of my time. I won't waste it on regrets. I'll throw myself into my work with passion and dedication. Just as I once gave everything for love, I can now burn with the same intensity for my dreams. I made mistakes, and I'll bear the consequences. Then, I'll get back up and keep moving forward. Every day, my schedule is packed, but I always make time for my child. Sarah, as understanding as ever, said, Mommy, you don't have to work so hard to pick me up. The nanny can take care of me. I hugged her. It's not hard for Mommy to pick you up. Sarah said. But mommy, you work and take care of me at the same time. It must be difficult, right? I want to do something to help you, I said. It's not difficult because mommy needs you, as long as you're by my side. I'm full of energy. Don't feel burdened. Sarah, you don't need to do anything. Your presence alone brings mommy happiness and joy. Sarah smiled and gave me a kiss. Mother and daughter embraced. The happiness I once felt when I embraced Hudson had slowly disappeared. But now I felt it again. My daughter. Her mere existence makes me happy. I continued to work like crazy. Saving money. Only by saving enough money could I chase my dreams without any burdens. Jack said I was his lucky charm. And now he has become mine. His role as the secondary male lead became a hit. And his status skyrocketed. The photos that made him famous became especially significant at this turning point in his life. People flocked to me, drawn by my reputation. Jack also introduced me to bigger clients. My rates increased once again, and I resigned from the magazine to become a freelance photographer, earning a substantial income. I soon saved enough for the down payment on a house. Because of my rising status, people started calling me teacher when they met me, treating me with utmost respect. Even when I brought Sarah to the studio, no one said anything. Sarah developed a love for photography too, and I often saw her playing with my equipment. Whenever I had time, I would teach her. While I worked, she would play with the camera, taking pictures here and there, just as I did when I was a child. Occasionally, she would be mischievous, breaking things that didn't matter much. But no one dared to complain, because I'm a top photographer. Those with skill and status always have privileges. Perhaps the title of Mrs. Movie Star that I once longed for would have brought me similar privileges, but they don't compare to the pride I feel from earning my own status through hard work. Now I realize that being a benefactor means helping each other grow and succeed. Like Jack and me, with Hudson, I was forced to clip my wings, to become invisible at home. He never truly respected me as an equal. The halo of love blinded me to the reality of the situation, dragging me down for so many years. Now, having climbed out of the water and standing at a distance, I can see how irrational I was when I was caught up in it all. I no longer dwell on how he once viewed me. I loved him, and I don't regret it. I left him, and I don't regret that either. To love fiercely, to hate boldly, with a heart as steadfast as a rock. Chapter 14. Occasionally, I would spot Hudson fully disguised, waiting in his car outside the apartment. I knew him too well. I could recognize him instantly. When he saw Sarah and me, he lowered his hat, got out of the car, and walked up to us, speaking softly. Nicole, Sarah. He was so heavily disguised, and his voice was so quiet that Sarah didn't recognize him. She looked at him with a puzzled expression. I smiled and, on purpose, spoke loudly. What a surprise to see you here, Emperor Wu. People nearby turned to look, and he immediately jumped back into his car, too scared to speak to me any further. We stared at each other from across the landscaping, and I wore a mocking smile. He seemed embarrassed and quickly drove away. As my status in the industry grew, I started working with bigger and more famous stars. Occasionally, I would run into Hudson at the studio. He would linger nearby, calling me Teacher Lee, complimenting my photography skills, and speaking to me like a stranger, as if we had never been in love, as if we had never had a child together. I politely referred to him as Teacher Wu. His eyes lit up, eager to talk more, but I would hold up my camera and say, Teacher Wu, I need to get back to work. He would leave, disappointed. A few days later, Layla cornered me in the restroom. Nicole, Hudson really loves you. You two should get back together. I washed my hands, looking at her tired, made-up face in the mirror, and coldly asked, Don't you like him? Why are you trying to get us back together? She was silent for a moment before saying, I've been with Hudson for years. He's kept himself clean, never getting involved with other women. It's hard to believe, given his looks, status, and wealth, that he's remained so pure, especially in an industry as chaotic as ours. I couldn't help but fall for him. I said, Oh, Layla continued, when I found out about you, I was jealous and treated you poorly. I'm truly sorry. I finished washing my hands and said, I understand. Layla added, it's been tough for him. He doesn't have a strong background, and making it in this industry has been incredibly difficult. Every step he takes has to be careful. You've seen him at his lowest, at his most desperate, so you should understand how hard he's worked to get to where he is now. His career is his life. He's remained faithful to you. Why can't you understand that? I turned to her, calmly saying, I do understand his struggles, which is why we broke up. If he insists on getting back together, it'll only bring more trouble for himself. With that, I left the restroom. I had work to do and was on a tight schedule. Other people didn't matter. They weren't worth wasting time on. Layla didn't approach me again. Even Hudson didn't dare to speak to me anymore. In 2 years, I bought a house. The timing, location, and opportunity all aligned perfectly. Housing prices had just dropped, and I had saved up enough to buy a home that allowed Sarah and me to live comfortably. I happily invited my biggest supporter, Jack, and a few new friends to celebrate. If you're busy, you don't have to come, I told him. I'll be there for sure. That evening, Jack showed up, excited to celebrate with us. Despite his busy schedule, Jack managed to keep his promise. It made me wonder even more why Hudson had repeatedly failed to keep his promises. We had dinner together in the new house. Sarah held the camera, taking pictures of us. When I looked at the photos, I saw that she had captured the angles and atmosphere perfectly. She had inherited my talent. Chapter 15. When Sarah was in 2nd grade, an opportunity presented itself. The global photography competition had begun. Sarah, growing more mature, said, Mom, you can go take photos around the world and fulfill your dream. I'll work hard to achieve my own dreams too. I used to think that I had to stay with her until she was 18 before I could travel the world to take photos. But then Sarah told me that it wasn't necessary. She said that by staying with her, I was putting a burden on her. She said, Mom, didn't you say that benefactors help each other, and love is mutual? I'm helping you fulfill your dream now, and in the future, you'll help me with mine, so go ahead without worry. At that moment, I cried until my eyes were red. After discussing it for half a month, Sarah still insisted on her idea. She even demonstrated her ability to live independently and her good relationship with the nanny. I was finally convinced. Sometimes I wondered, if I frequently left Sarah while claiming to love her, wouldn't my actions be just like Hudson's? I criticized Hudson, yet I was doing the same thing. It seemed hypocritical. Sarah said, Mom, it's different. How is it different? Because I can openly call you Mom. You can take me out anytime. If I get sick, you wouldn't leave me behind, and we can talk on the phone every day. I was stunned for a moment and asked her, Do you know that Uncle Wu is? She nodded. I know. He's actually my dad. All these years, Sarah hadn't asked about her father, and I thought she had gotten used to life without one. But it turns out she had known the truth for a long time. Without me realizing it, she had grown from an innocent child into a mature, smart little person. I don't remember much from before I was 3, but after that, I remember a lot. I remember when I had a fever, and he left me to avoid the paparazzi. I also remember when Auntie Layla tried to lock us up. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. He made me call him uncle, and he'll always be just an uncle. I hugged her tightly. Her support gave me the determination I needed. I decided to go to Africa to take photos and enter the photography competition. On the day I left, the sky above the airport was clear and sunny. Not a cloud in sight. Amidst the roar of the airplane engines, Sarah waved to me. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Sarah. I turned and walked into the terminal with a few members of the Geographic magazine team. As I passed by the glass, I saw my reflection, dressed in a sleek black tracksuit, my hair tied in a neat ponytail, with a backpack on my shoulders and a camera around my neck. I stared at the reflection for a moment. A friend called out, Nicole. I snapped out of it and quickly followed them. The more I walked, the bigger my smile grew. The dream I had cherished for so many years was finally coming true. Chapter 16. 2 months later, I returned to the country. My experiences in Africa were thrilling and unforgettable. I took photos that I was truly satisfied with. While I still prefer photographing animals, my talent clearly lies in capturing people, and I enjoy photographing people. A person's soul is reflected in their appearance, their demeanor, and every movement they make. A photographer's job is to capture that most special moment. I chose my favorite shot from the Long-Tongue tribe, titled Lion and Woman, and submitted it to the competition judges. Back home, I spent time with Sarah. While I was in Africa, we stayed in touch as much as possible. Unless the network was down, I always made sure to check in with her. Now that I was back, we spent half a month together, enjoying our rare time as mother and daughter. Jack called me and said, "Nicole, you promised to be my personal photographer. When are you going to start?" I thought for a moment and smiled. Next month. After spending time with Sarah, I became Jack's personal photographer. He finished filming and embarked on a promotional tour, and I followed him, capturing many beautiful images. In recent years, he had become a top-tier actor. At the peak of his career, like Hudson once did, he transitioned into films, producing works that were well received. We became very good friends. When the tour ended, the annual Golden Dove Awards began. I followed Jack to the event to take photos. One of his films had been nominated, and he had a good chance of winning Best Actor. The award ceremony was glamorous, with dazzling lights. Countless stars and celebrities filled the room. I saw Hudson. He was more polished and mature than ever, every move radiating the grace of a seasoned actor. When he saw me, he froze for a moment, then quickly composed himself. I looked at him calmly for a moment before turning away. Jack spoke to me, and when I looked up, I caught Hudson's jealous expression. It didn't affect me at all. I remained emotionless as I followed Jack into the venue. The ceremony began. As it reached its peak, the host announced the nominees for Best Actor: Jack, Hudson, and another actor. I am pleased to announce that the Best Actor award goes to the host, herself a movie queen, drew out the suspense. The entire audience held their breath. Hudson. There was a brief flash of disappointment on Jack's face, but he quickly smiled and applauded. Hudson stepped onto the stage to accept the award and began his speech. After thanking a long list of people, he said, "In addition to the people I've just mentioned, I want to thank one more person, someone who has been with me throughout my journey and helped me grow. This is my third award, and I once made a promise to myself that after winning 3 awards, I would fulfill her wish." The crowd buzzed with excitement. The host asked, "Who is this person?" Hudson held up the trophy and said, "She is my girlfriend and my future wife." "Yes, I have a girlfriend, and I also have a daughter." The room erupted in shock. Chapter 17. When Hudson publicly revealed that he had a girlfriend and a daughter, it nearly broke the internet. I was there at the event, and while I was a bit surprised by his announcement, that was all. Things that are no longer needed, even when presented again. "Don't move me." He said it was my wish. It's kind of funny. That was my wish once upon a time. But now, I no longer have that wish. Jack was shocked and curious. Oh my God. So the rumors about Hudson's secret marriage were true. And he even has a daughter. I wonder who his girlfriend is. I said, "Yeah. Who could it be?" Jack asked, "Do you think she's from inside the industry or outside?" I replied, "I have no idea." A couple of days later, Hudson drove to my house. This time, he wasn't heavily disguised. He confidently stepped out of the car and walked straight up to me as I was picking Sarah up from school. "Nicole." He pulled out an exquisite box, got down on one knee, and said, "Marry me." The people around us were stunned. Sarah looked up at me. Hudson's eyes were full of hope. The autumn wind gently brushed against our faces, carrying a slight chill. I said, "Hudson, we've broken up. I won't be with you." Chapter 18. Hudson's public proposal put Sarah and me in a difficult situation. Reporters swarmed us, eager to interview me. I decided to take Sarah and escape to the mountains. Jack called me, "Nicole, you're truly amazing. I can't believe I've been working with such a big shot all this time." I said, "Does being in a relationship with Hudson make me a big shot? Wasn't I before?" Jack replied, No, That's not what I meant. I mean, this is so unexpected. Do you understand how shocked I am? I laughed and exchanged a few words with him, making it clear where I stood with Hudson. He was surprised but understanding. Even my father called. "Why didn't you tell me you were dating Hudson and had his child?" He complained over the phone. "If I had known, we wouldn't have had all those disagreements." I said, "Wouldn't I still be your daughter no matter who I was dating? My actions are the same. So why would your attitude be different?" He replied, "But he's Hudson." I hung up the phone and gave a bitter smile. There was a time when I longed to be Mrs. Hudson openly. Now that I don't want it anymore, Hudson is willing to offer it. But it only brings me trouble. Some time later, I received a message from the photography competition telling me that I had won first place and inviting me to Switzerland to accept the award. This news was a delightful surprise. I took Sarah and flew to Switzerland. When the reporters saw me, they desperately took photos and bombarded me with questions about Hudson, completely ignoring my work. I was a bit annoyed and didn't answer. On stage, when it was my turn to give a speech, I thought for a moment and thanked Sarah. Then I added, "Everyone back home is shocked to learn that I'm Hudson's ex-girlfriend. But I need to clarify something. We broke up years ago, and we won't be getting back together. This award is something I earned on my own and has nothing to do with him." He said that becoming Mrs. Wu was my wish, but I need to correct that. It isn't. I don't want to be Mrs. Wu. As for my daughter, I trust she can make her own decisions. I hope everyone will respect me and focus on my work, not on whose girlfriend I am. After saying that, I walked off the stage. I have my own life, and it has nothing to do with Hudson. Our paths diverged long ago, and we continue to grow further apart. Chapter 19. The news spread back home, causing quite a stir. No one found it surprising anymore that I rejected Hudson. After all, I had just won one of the most prestigious global photography awards. I had also become a renowned photographer in the industry. I reconciled with my family. Although we had been through so much, we could never return to how things were before. Still, I would be a dutiful daughter, as they had raised me. Sarah spent some time with Hudson, though I didn't ask what they talked about. She's a mature and independent child, and whatever decisions she makes, I will support her. Hudson began openly pursuing me. It used to be me waiting for him. Now it was him chasing after me. It's a bit ironic, but I never accepted his advances. One day, he followed me to the park and asked me, with a look of sadness, "Nicole, can we really never go back to the way things were?" I pointed to a nearby camellia and said, "Hudson, the flower has already withered. What we had between us, like that flower, had fallen to the ground and could, united with the soil, never return to its former state." I looked at him. There was no longer any emotion in my heart. The wind blew, the clouds scattered, and the love we once had long disappeared during that endless blooming season. Hudson looked at me, tears streaming down his face. After that, he didn't seek me out again. He may have finally realized that we would never be together again. Many people didn't understand why I couldn't give Hudson another chance. But I don't need their understanding. The camellia blooms, then withers. After withering, I bloom alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. I live only for myself.